Hello, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all to this afternoon's licensing subcommittee. I'd first of all like to apologise for the delay in starting. Can I ask that you only speak when invited to do so by the chair? If you wish to speak, please raise your hand and direct all communication via the chair. Please ensure that your mics are muted when you are not speaking, apart from the chair, who does not need to mute their mic at any stage. And this is to ensure that the meeting is conducted effectively. When speaking, please be succinct and do not exceed the allocated timeframes. If you're referring to a page or picture in a report, please be specific. If you are having any technical difficulties, please use the chat function in Google Meet to alert the meeting, and we do actually have an IT support person online who will be able to provide assistance. Please do not use the chat function for putting formal questions to the subcommittee. Any persistent disruptive behaviour will result in removal from the meeting. Once all applications have been considered, any remaining parties will be asked to log out of the hearing promptly. This will enable members to have the opportunity to deliberate and make a decision on each application they have heard. Each party will be notified of the decision within 5 working days. However, should you so wish, if you contact the licensing service, they will be able to give you a skeleton decision tomorrow morning. Thank you very much. At this point, I would like to hand over to members to elect a chair. Thank you.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Peter Snell.
Seconded, thank you.
Thank you for that nomination. So I will chair the meeting. First, I'll introduce myself, Councillor Peter Snell from Dalston. Perhaps Brian and Gilbert could introduce themselves.
I'm Councillor Brian Bell, Brownswood Ward.
Councillor Gilbert Smith, Stoke Newington Ward.
And the decisions today are all in wards we do not represent in line with the Council's rules and standing orders. So, apologies for absence. I don't think I've received any. And I'm pleased to say we have the same people on this committee as were on the interim hearing for the Heart of Hackney. So we've been able to maintain continuity. We are going to have a slight change from our usual agenda order from the one that was published, because the first people haven't turned up. So we're going to run through the other items and leave them to the end of the meeting. So it's going to be Heart of Hackney, then we're going to look at the temporary event notice, and then we're going to come back and deal with the first item that was on the agenda. I'll introduce other people who are sat around this room. Hackney Licensing is, I think, represented by David Chewett. Mario is there to sort out any items that come up. Sorry, Subangini Sriyamana is actually the licensing officer, so she deals with the practicalities of presenting us with what's before us. Amanda North is our legal advisor, and we can turn to her at any stage for legal advice, and we would ask her to come in if we ever start varying from the straight and narrow and do anything we're not supposed to do. I think that's all the council officers, isn't it? Do the police want to introduce themselves?
Yeah, it's PC Neil Humwick. I'm from the police licensing unit.
And you haven't got anybody with you today?
I have got David Atkins, who's one of the police officers that gave a statement, but I think unless there's any dispute as to what the statements contain, I wouldn't necessarily be need to call him.
Thank you very much. And for the licensees who are affected by this review, perhaps they could introduce themselves.
Yes, my name's Guy Hicks, Raven Consultants, and I'm representing the Heart of Hackney today.
And who do we have from the Heart of Hackney?
It's Mr. Ali Abadja and Hussein actually.
Is that the licensee and the DPS?
Yeah, that's correct.
Licensee and the DPS. Okay, thank you both.
Oh no, DPS. Not DPS. No, the DPS ain't here at the moment.
It's not here.
Yeah.
Okay. And are you the licensee?
No, I'm direct. I'm just going to be translating, and Ali's the licensee.
Okay. Right, just need to
Chair,
know
it's a
who's who.
little bit noisy. It's hard to hear. Ben.
Probably,
Background
if
noise.
people are
We are
giving
in the
evidence, if you
rest. We
switch
are in
your
the
microphones off when you're not speaking.
sure.
I think with that's taken us through, everybody. Now, so you have an agenda in front of you. I think I need to clarify. Some of us get written agendas. I find it much easier to chair these meetings online with a written agenda. That does cause some confusion because the online version has page numbers and the written agenda often does not have page numbers. So please stop us if at any point any fellow councillors or anyone is not clear what document's referred to. Come to me as the chair, and we need to get that clear. We need to be looking at the same evidence and understand what we're looking at. But I'll just take you through the paper agenda that I'm working off. Hang on, first of all, do any members have any interest to declare before we get stuck in?
None.
No, I've had none notified. So in the papers that I have had, we have in fact very usefully got two sets of procedures here. I mean, actually, let's face it, we've got effectively three different types of procedures we're considering today. But in terms of the license hearing, a normal license hearing is different from hearing a appeal for a review. And I'm pleased to say that these papers set out both. So it's a wee bit confusing as you work through the paper version, but certainly the normal licensing process is covered in the first guidance note, and then some way into the document there's the second guidance note which sets out the process for a review. So what we're doing at this stage is going straight to the review, and I haven't got a numbered page for that. If someone's got the online version they can read it out, but that's what I will outline at this stage. Is that okay? So basically, we've got the appointment of the chair and the introduction. I think I've set out how the review will proceed, unless Amanda wants to come and comment on what I've already said. We'll ask the licensing officer, Sue Bangini, to outline the report. We will ask the applicant, which is the police, to present their case in support of the review and the outcome they're seeking. We will ask, there are, I don't think, any other responsible authorities represented here today. I'm not sure about that, but I think this is just the police that we're hearing from. There are no other persons here today. It's then going to be over to the premises license club certificate holder, who are being represented by Guy Hicks today, to talk about what they would like us to do in response to a breach that we've all recognised existed. And then we as the councillors will take that discussion to decide which of the options set out in the report we think are the most appropriate in this case. We've limited each of those stages to 5 minutes each, but we tried to go for 15 minutes discussion, and then everybody gets a chance to make closing remarks. We'll be quite clear about our concerns in the discussion, and those closing remarks are your chance to set our mind at rest, so we make the decision that you want at the end of that discussion. I hope that's all clear. Good. So I think then we're ready to start on this review, aren't we? So can I get Sue Bangini to outline the background to the review and the papers before us?
Thank you, Chair. Licensing Service or receipt of an application from the Metropolitan Police for a summary license review under Section 53A of the Licensing Act 2003 in respect of the premises license at Heart of Hackney, 255 Mass Street. The application followed an incident of serious crime disorder which occurred on the 29th of May 2021. At the interim hearing on the 8th of June, the decision was made to suspend the premises license with immediate effect pending full review, given the likelihood of serious crime, the failures to comply with the conditions of the premises license, and the COVID-19 regulations. The police have submitted additional information which has been circulated. I have nothing else to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sue. But can we go straight into the application then? Are we going to hear from PC Hunswick? Do you want to just take it away from there?
Yeah, Chair. Afternoon. This is pretty much the same submission that was made at the interim steps hearing. Basically, during the early hours of Saturday, the 29th of May, a victim with a stab wound to the arm presented at the Homerton Hospital. Police were informed by medics that the incident had occurred at the heart of Hackney, and officers attended to find the venue almost empty, with broken glass and blood on the floor. CCTV confirms that the incident has indeed occurred, and I trust that the Chair and other councillors have had a chance to view that CCTV. The security then ushered the suspects out the side door after the fight, where a bloodstained knife was later found by officers in the alleyway. At no point were police contacted by the venue, either during or after the attack. Chair, you will have seen the CCTV from inside the venue. Will note that two of the SIA present, of one of them is merely a spectator on what was allowed to be a prolonged incident. CCTV also shows patrons at the bar. There's people dancing, people standing, drinking, all of which is in breach of COVID legislation, which in itself has led to successful revocations around the country during the course of this pandemic. Licensing officers, as a result of this incident, attended on the evening of the 29th and again found numerous COVID breaches. People were standing drinking, there was service at the bar and extremely loud music. There were numerous breaches of the licence, these conditions being numbers 12, 16, 17, 18, 20, 24, 26, 29, 32 and 34. There were obviously various degrees of seriousness, but they were all breaches. Once the licensee was identified, he stated he did not know that he was the licensee, and he'd never read the licence and was also completely ignorant of the COVID legislation, despite us being subject to the pandemic for well over a year now. Officers also witnessed people entering without being searched, despite the stabbing incident having occurred less than 24 hours earlier. My colleagues, PC Perry and PC Atkins, have both submitted statements in this regard as to what they found. The premises licence holder stated to my colleagues that he has not had any problems since he bought the venue 2 years ago. However, it transpires there was a similar incident in 2013, which is listed in the Hackney Gazette, in which the licensee is named as one Ali Abachi, the same gentleman, after which the premises licence was suspended due to the fear of reprisals by gang members in the venue. It's clear that Mr Abachi has tried to lie to my colleagues about the length of time in which he's been involved in the venue. It's clear that Mr Abachi has not learnt from his previous incident, and we do not believe that even with the most stringent of training that he will be capable of running this venue correctly, and therefore submit that the only option is to revoke the licence. And that's my submission.
Do councillors Bell or Smith want any clarification from either Neil or from Sue Bangini? Because I should have asked you earlier on the original presentation. Any clarification required?
Chair, could I just ask Neil, which of the conditions that they didn't adhere to, in your eyes, is the sort of the biggest misdemeanor?
Well, the most notable one is the first one, which is the quality of the CCTV and the location of the cameras. From the ones that were downloaded, they're supposed to, or from the conditions, should I say, it should have a comprehensive CCTV system which ensures that all areas of the licensed premises are monitored, including all entry points. And the CCTV system should enable full frontal identification of every person entering in any light condition, which, from the quality of the CCTV, I think you can see that it doesn't. Certainly the location of the cameras, you know, the ones that were actually working, there was one covering the garden, there's the one that you've actually seen the footage from, and there was another one at the front foyer, but it wasn't facing the door, so you couldn't actually see anybody coming in. So that fouled from a crime and disorder point of view. There's no evidence there other than well, obviously you've seen the panoramic.
Yeah, which number is that on the conditions?
That is. That's number 12.
All right, because number 12 is not listed here. I've just got.
Yeah, that was, yeah, so that'd be, there were numerous breaches of the licence condition being 12, 16, 17, 18, and so on.
All right. It's just that 12's not listed in my papers.
Okay, that might have been the original draft
Okay.
from before we actually saw the footage.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much. That's it.
Councillor Bell?
And again, on that original statement from PC Perry, I think there's no mistake, isn't there, at the top of page 2 of his statement, where it says Mr. Batty did know he's a premise license holder. Your contention is he said at the time he didn't know.
Yeah, that's what was said to the two colleagues, because he was denying that he had any involvement in the venue until obviously he gave his name and they pulled up his license and saw that actually it was one and the same. Okay. Our contention is he's tried to mislead the two officers on the evening as to his involvement, because obviously it's all been put in front of him that these breaches are have occurred.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for that clarification and those corrections, Councillor Bell. If I just make some observations here, I mean, as our decision records, we approved, we basically suspended the licence at the expedited review. That was not contested by the licensee, and as a consequence, I was chairing that meeting, and I made it clear both to the police and councillors that I did not feel it was fair to this hearing to get into an extended discussion. So as far as this is concerned, we are starting from the beginning. There was reference at that meeting to a previous history of trouble. I'm covering this before, Guy, you come in, so you know where we're starting from, if that's okay. My understanding from previous reviews is that we consider both the seriousness of the offence, but we also consider whether there is a pattern of offences. So the fact that there was mention of a previous review back in 2013 has been confirmed with licensing officers here. And in fact, the existing licence conditions imply that that review took place, because there were things like the dispersal policy and that had to be agreed after that 2013 review. So that means that there is a history on these premises of reasons for concern, which therefore mean we need to take this most recent application for a review more seriously than if it was a one-off event. So I'm just putting that out for clarity at this point. And I think then, Guy, if you're going to present the case on behalf of the licensee, you can speak to that background. Do we need to clarify anything else at this stage? No? Amanda's letting me carry on at the moment, so I haven't broken any legal rules, I don't think. Can we just then come straight to you, Guy, if you're going to introduce the response to the application for the review?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to open up with the statement that the venue wholeheartedly accepts and does not make any attempt to avoid the seriousness of this incident, the COVID breaches, and the position that they now find themselves in. And that is our main position throughout. However, there are some points for clarity that the committee may wish to consider. With regards to the initial police submissions during the expedited review hearing, it was stated that the security had ushered out the suspect, and we've heard that word ushered again today. As you've seen on the CCTV, putting aside the obvious COVID breaches for now, there was an extremely chaotic scene for the two SIA to deal with, and I acknowledge that one of them was a spectator during that incident. But by their own submission, they made attempts to separate and keep both parties apart, and this meant that the suspect was taken through a side door, and as seen on the CCTV, he was actually marched from the venue and certainly not ushered. The word ushered intimates a degree of friendliness, which the actions of the SIA, particularly one SIA, are certainly not. There is an individual report which unfortunately came into my possession too late to submit, but it does make clear at this stage that any SIA, it should be made clear at this stage that any SIA in any venue would not be expected to detain a suspect for police in any circumstances unless a dynamic risk assessment was carried out and dictated their actions otherwise. Nobody should be forced to put their lives at risk, their health and safety at risk, without conducting that dynamic risk assessment. Police officers wouldn't do it, let alone SIA. And And please note that Mr. Ademir, who's from Solid Security, having spoken to his staff, found at least one of the SIA did in fact ask a customer to call the police and ambulance. The police state at no time were police called. They do state in the additional papers that have been viewed, which is namely the Chris report, and my apologies, I haven't got that in front of me, and they reported the LAS were called by the victim's brother, who was at the venue at the time, and I believe actually involved in the initial melee. And in my experience, as soon as the LAS are called and told of a stabbing, the LAS controller automatically informs the police. So I sort of dispute that, you know, the first the police ever knew about it was when the victim presented themselves into A&E. Mr. Abachi has held the licence for a number of years, including at the time of the previous review, which was of a similar nature in terms of the trigger for this review. I've asked the police to clarify crimes of a similar nature, such as ABH and GBH at the venue between those times. The MPS crime recording system can only go back 5 years, and the police have confirmed that there are no crimes of a similar nature during that time. And I would suggest, on the balance of probability, there are no crimes of a similar nature prior to that, post the 2013 review. So we've got this 8-year period between the review last time and this review where no crime has actually been reported or recorded. Mr. Abachi has confirmed that in terms of licensing visits to the premises, there was only one previous occasion where police and partners visited. I suspect this was an op condor visit due to how Mr. Abachi describes a large number of authorities entering the premises to check various things such as the conditions and whether they're being adhered to. I'm sure had this visit highlighted a venue not operating within the terms of its licence, the police would have brought this attention to your attention at the time, let alone now, yet there's no mention of previous licensing visits from the police at this time. I make this assertion not to cast any blame at the foot of the MPS, far from it. I know how busy the licensing unit is and how its attention is constantly drawn to Shoreditch and Dalston. I make the assertion because had visits been carried out by police or indeed council licensing, the breaches and poor management could have been highlighted much sooner. It is human nature that if left to your own devices, standards start to slip. I believe Mr. Abachi has committed exactly this misdemeanour. Not necessarily intentionally, but he has simply let things slip and slip further for a long period of time. Having looked at the licence myself and had discussions with Mr. Abachi, it seems that he's been desperate to operate the venue in a different manner for some time, and he feels that some of the conditions almost set the venue up to fail and prevent him from changing the way he operates and the clientele who frequent the premises. Mr. Abachi has invested £500,000 into this business. He pays his rates and he employs 8 local people within the venue. And the security team that are also sourced from a locally run Hackney-based company. I would respectfully ask the committee to consider 2 things. Firstly, is the incident so serious as to warrant revocation of the premises licence? And secondly, if it is so serious, is it therefore impossible to bring the venue back to a position where it can operate safely and within the limits of its licence? If the answer is no to one or indeed both those questions, then I would respectfully suggest the committee consider the following as an alternative to revocation. Firstly, the transfer of the licence to another premises licence holder. Now, that would be our suggestion would be Mr. Hussein Aksu. Mr. Aksu has a strong grasp of the English language, which has been an issue with Mr. Abachi, thereby making it far easier for him to understand and operate the licence once appropriately trained. And he is also a trusted business partner of Mr. Abachi, who has been very reluctant to transfer the licence due to trust issues. Excuse me. Changing the DPS to Mr. Turek Kaya. An experienced DPS. Amongst many bars, he was the DPS of the Mother Stroke 333 bar in Shoreditch, smack bang in the middle of Shoreditch, very, very busy venue. This should be subject to police checks and approval. I will conduct training, which to this point, even post 2013, has been non-existent in that venue for all staff, including the premises licence holder, and to maintain that training on a yearly basis with records of proof to show responsible authorities. It will include drunk sales, sales to children, and wave training. The business needs to be redirected towards a more family-orientated operation, which would include amending existing conditions. For example, the licence currently excludes children at any time, which would need to be removed or amended. The addition of conditions such as substantial food always being available during operating hours, personal licence holder always being on duty after 8 PM when the venue is operating. Excuse me. I will also write policies subject to police approval around dispersal, outside areas, smoking areas, drugs, weapons and search. A full redecoration and repair of the venue, brighten the outlook, making it much more welcome to families. The SIA, when operating, will use body-worn CCTV, the Challenge 25 condition, and a full refurbishment of the existing CCTV to ensure full coverage of the venue, including a facial shot of all who enter. We acknowledge that the CCTV is rubbish and does need sorting out. I anticipate, or I've already anticipated, the police will say that training is not going to fix this issue. You've already heard that from PC Humwick. I would argue that it can and it will. There are many examples in Hackney of venues that have failed in far worse circumstances, yet have, because of the type of interventions I've mentioned, gone on to be successful venues, still operating years later. There have been venues where an innocent person was hit by a stray bullet and the gunman stabbed during an altercation, and to my knowledge, the venue is still open and running. 25 people sprayed in an acid attack. Venue continued to run for some time after and only closed due to financial difficulties. Yes, this is a serious incident. Yes, there are multiple failings around the licence and COVID. Is this retrievable with the correct experienced person or persons intervening? Yes, absolutely, 100%. Mr. Abachi takes full responsibility for putting the livelihoods of a number of local Hackney people at serious risk. He takes full responsibility for the manner in which a young man was hurt inside his venue. Yes, he had a chance previously 8 years ago. Yes, he's here again asking for a second chance. But the difference is he'd not grasped the seriousness previously. He did not make the necessary changes in order to go forward in a manner compatible with a licence, including training, over and above what most venues currently receive. That's my submission, Chair, and I would welcome a discussion around any other considerations from the committee in order that this premises does not have its licence revoked. Thank you.
Before we question you, I wondered if Mr. Abati and Mr. Atsu also wanted to say anything before we start asking for clarification.
Bir şey söylemek istiyor musun?
İşte benim için söyle. 20 senedir burada hizmet veriyorum. Yani herkes beni tanıyor.
Ali is just saying he's been in Hackney, serving for Hackney, like running a business in Hackney for over 20 years. He didn't want anyone to get harmed like that. I mean, he's working for the community basically. His intentions of running a business and doing it's not that. I mean, yeah, when he goes, like, this ain't for anything, but he knows most of you, he knows your faces, he's served to you. He's not a bad person, he's not a thing, you know. He helps the community as much as he can, basically, that's what he's trying to say. He's just asking for no chance, basically.
Okay, but my understanding of Guy Hicks' submission is that Ali Abachi will stop being the licensee, and in fact, a new licensee with a.
I mean, I will step in, but
handing of English will be taking over. Am I understanding that?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, and can I just ask for a couple of points of clarification, Guy, before I hand it over to my colleague? I missed, you talked about a previous heavy-handed enforcement visit or multi-agency enforcement visit, did not find anything. I missed out exactly what date that happened.
The date would be a guess, if I'm honest, Chair, because Mr. Abachi doesn't know for sure. It's only the way he describes the operation. I don't know if he's going to come in there. No.
Sorry, Mr. Abachi, can you switch your microphone off? Because we can't hear you at the moment. Go on, do you want to say, Mr. Abachi, what that date was?
He thinks it was like 3 years back, just before Christmas time.
Okay, so that's 2017. And the other question I was going to put to you, Guy, was you're recognising a lot of change has to happen. So that ain't going to happen overnight. It seems to me that what you're suggesting is that if we don't revoke the licence, we suspend the licence for long enough for all those considerable changes to come through and to be agreed with the police, because they are all subject to agreement with licensing and the police. Have I understood you correctly?
You have, Chair, yes.
Thank you. Okay, other councillors, any clarification?
Yeah, Chair, I've got two sort of main issues really. One to the police and one to the licensee. So to the police, you mentioned kind of a conflict with various gangs. I'd just like you to go into that a bit more, if you don't mind, and also to the licensee. 2013 was the last review, 8 years ago, and you've done well since then. But why didn't you kind of get your act together in terms of your conditions and everything, and going with your conditions and doing what you're supposed to do. So 2 questions, one for the police, one for the licensing. So the police come in first.
Shall I go on? Neil Hunrick, you come in first.
The reference to gangs was purely because it was before my time in the licensing unit. It wasn't until the previous review came to light in a chance discussion that I even knew that there'd been a previous review. However, from what I can work out from it, it was gang related at the time, and there was the submission, I think, was that there was police had concerns that there would be reprisals, and that was on that basis that the venue had its license suspended. Now, I'm not saying there's any gang links or any intelligence this time round, although clearly people carrying knives in venues does generally tend to be a gang related sort of thing to do. So I'm not trying to link irretrievably the venue to gangs, merely that obviously there is a history.
Okay, great, thank you for that.
I've seen your hand up, Guy. Do you want to come in before the licensees?
Just very quickly, Chair, can we seek some clarity around the actual weapon? We're talking about knife, and again, language used makes things sound far more serious than it is. It's my understanding that it's a Stanley type blade. I'm not trying to detract from the fact that it still causes a serious injury, but I just would like to establish for your benefit, are we talking about, a huge great butcher's knife, or are we talking about a Stanley blade? Thank you, Chair.
They both sound pretty serious to me, and did we ever get that confirmed, Neil, by the hospital? We know, did we demonstrate that was the weapon that caused the injuries?
Well, we believe the weapon was found because it was found covered in blood outside the venue, and I haven't seen it, but it's described on the crime report as being a carpet fitters type knife, which would be consistent with being a Stanley knife, which obviously, as you're aware, can cause. I mean, they're very, very sharp and can cause some serious injuries.
Okay, and then picking up on Councillor Smith's other inquiry, which was basically to the applicants, why did standards slip? I mean, you do not employ enforcement officers to go around telling you how to run your premises. It's down to you as the people who have the license to maintain those standards.
That's totally correct as well. I mean, he's not just doing that. He was another answer why he didn't reapply to fix the license and after.
Okay. You're just saying, yes, you got it wrong. Thank you.
Yes.
Go on, Guy, come back if you want.
Yeah, I just think to reiterate a point there, they acknowledge they've got it wrong. There is definitely a language barrier, and I've struggled at times during this consultation with Mr. Abachi to get the message across, and I think that is a struggle in terms of his license, reading his license, and that's why we want to make the changes that we need to make. But like I say, we do acknowledge it.
Okay. Shall I let Councillor Bell come in and come back to you later, Councillor Smith?
Yeah,
or
sure.
Do you want to come back straight away?
No, that's okay. Let Councillor Bell come in.
Have you got anything you want to clarify, Councillor Bell?
Well, it's a more than clarification. I thought Mr. Hicks's contribution was not very helpful. First of all, I think it should be sent round in advance. These list of conditions you wanted us to consider would be more helpful to have that sent round in advance, not just read out tonight. I think you knew better than that. Secondly, I find it quite pathetic to blame licensed responsible authorities for what Mr. Apache did or didn't do. To say there wasn't enough inspections always struck me as the most pathetic way to make excuses for someone. Most licensees know what they should be doing. They don't need to be inspected every 5 minutes and shouldn't do. But at the end of the day, the issue here is going to become one of trust. Can we trust Mr. Apache and those close to him? Because Mr. Axer, I understand, is already close to him, already involved. And can we trust the people who have broken the conditions so blatantly on a number of occasions and breached the COVID regulations? Can we trust any of them to take over the premises and not do it again? And at the moment, frankly, I'm unconvinced. It's slightly annoying Mr. Apache cannot even ask people to be quiet in his premises so we can hear him properly. That's not someone who's taken this process seriously. But that's only a relatively trivial point. The main point is there have been breaches before. Do we have the confidence that we simply transfer someone close to him that it would not happen again? And I would take a lot of convincing on that point.
We seem to be slightly getting into the discussion phase. Gilbert, were you after clarification? Well, I can see your hand is up, Guy Hicks, but I don't want this to be just a two-way conversation, so it's okay. Are you still on clarification, Councillor Smith, or are we getting into...
well, I think it's more part of the discussion, actually, really. So I'll just leave it there for the moment.
So shall we let Guy Hicks come back, and then we'll just formally go into a proper discussion on this, yes? Okay. Go on, Guy, you had your hand up.
Just for Councillor Bell, the list of conditions wasn't actually a list of conditions, it's suggestions of as a means or a way forward. I'm well aware that if I was presenting you with a list of conditions, you should have them in front of you. These are merely suggestions, you know, if you were of a mind to not revoke the licence and potentially give us that period of time where we can make such amendments in accordance with the police. You know, we'd need to seek their agreement for most of those as a start. In terms of it being pathetic that I've tried to blame the police, I think I was fairly clear that I'm not actually laying blame at the police at all. That was the opening line. I don't blame the police because I know how busy they are. I understand. So I just wanted to sort of clarify that point. And I think that was it. Thank you.
Okay, so I think let's move on to the discussion proper. I think from my comments and Councillor Bell's comments, have we addressed everything you raised, Brian? Because I think you had 2 points. I hope we've addressed them both. Yeah, we'll pick up anything in discussion anyway. From Councillor Bell and my own comments, I think don't use that word honest again, Guy. We don't expect our enforcement officers to be helping manage premises across the borough. So that
really wasn't my point. It really wasn't my point, and I'm sorry that that's been misunderstood.
Okay, now kicking off the discussion, I similarly was disappointed we didn't have this in advance of the meeting. I don't know if it's been discussed with the police, but perhaps Neil Hunwick would come back to us and say what is being proposed here, which I understand is not the complete revocation of the licence, but the suspension of the licence to allow areas of failure to be addressed in consultation with you and with the licensing authority, because they are talking about seeking a variation in the licence to create a different type of establishment. Do you think that would change your views that only full revocation is an appropriate response? Do you want to come back on that now? You're on mute at the moment.
I think you'd already addressed what would be my main concern, which is that when a venue gets to this situation whereby revocation has been asked for, it's all too easy to offer up a change of licensee and DPS as being the panacea of the issues that have been caused, mainly because it is so difficult to find somebody that is independent. Generally speaking, whoever owns the business is going to be the puppeteer. Obviously, the licensee, the name on over the door, so to speak, may be the owner, but it may also be just somebody that's there just to, for the Licensing Act and doesn't actually have the final say. And so, I think in this circumstances, given that we've had 2 serious incidents, albeit a few years apart, they've winged it in between the two. What's to stop them winging it moving forward, albeit with a different name over the door, but Mr. Abachi being the owner in the background? Because obviously he's always going to have a financial interest in it. It's his business. He's going to draw money out of that business, and therefore he's going to control that business. His word will be the final word, and that would be my concern.
Sorry, I am slightly worried about you saying they've winged it in between. Can you address, because I see the basis of previous reviews, and there's a list of all the crimes committed associated with a particular venue. I can name a number of venues where that's happened. What I understand Guy Hicks is saying is that there have been no incidents associated with this venue over the 8-year period. Now, I walk past quite frequently, and it always looks really quiet to me. I was amazed to see on the video it was so full. Is it just that it's normally a very quiet venue? What's going on there, and why don't you have any evidence of crimes in that period when you're alleging that they were winging it?
Well, when I say, yeah, I mean, when I say winging it, obviously, if he doesn't know now what his conditions were on his policy now, he hasn't known for the last 9 years. So that when I say winging it, he's not been compliant with his premises license for all that period of time. He hasn't suddenly forgotten what they are. You know, he's denied even reading the license. So that's what I meant probably by winging it. As far as the crime's concerned, we don't dispute that. I mean, Guy asked me what we had from the crime point of view, and we had nothing in the last 5 years because we can't get data that's older than that. But obviously one of our submissions, you can look at two different ways, is that they've not contacted police when this has happened. So other incidents could have happened now where they've not contacted police. By the same token, yes, there might be another victim who should have contacted police, but we're not starting from a baseline whereby they're ringing police and keeping an incident log showing you what's gone on. So we don't really know what's been going on there for the last 9 years because there's no record of it.
Thank you. I've said enough at this stage. Councillor Smith or Councillor Bell, who wants to go first?
Well, Brian,
Go
if you're
on.
okay, I'll just. Yeah, I mean, just going back to the conditions. I mean, some of them are pretty straightforward in terms of the sort of language barrier. You know, it wouldn't be difficult really for interpreter to come and say, well, patrons are not permitted to take drinks outside of the premises. But the big one for me is 26, when a dispersal policy was asked for by the 1st of December 2013 and was never submitted. I mean, that just seems to be tragic, really, in my case, from my point of view, that wasn't done. That's an easy thing to do. So why haven't these easy things been done? Why hasn't an interpreter come along and actually sort of, black and white, here's condition 24, this is what it means, and this is what you have to do? I don't know who wants to take that question up, but
I think only Mr. Abachi can answer that, unfortunately, in these circumstances.
I mean, sen nasıl diyeyim? O 2013'te şey olduğunda sana demişler bir disposal order yap bize içeri yolla. Sen o dosyaları niye yollamadın diyor. Yeah, he doesn't. I mean, he's saying he didn't know that he had to fill something out.
But does he understand that when there are conditions on a license, that he has to look at those conditions, and if he doesn't understand them, he has to get someone to basically interpret them for him and make sure that he understands exactly what he should be doing?
Sen anlamıyorsan diyor, birisi
Chair, can I
not
jump in
diyor,
there?
birisi şey yapsın diyor.
Yeah, can I jump in there? Councillor, I think we wholeheartedly back down on the whole point of all these things should have been done. You're 100% right on picking on all these points. We really don't dispute that. He should have done all of these things. Absolutely 100%. All I can say is going forward, there's no doubt that he will do those things because I'll be on his back. I will make sure all of those things are done. I will make sure that the next person to take that premises license, whether it remains with Mr. Abachi or whether it sits with Mr. Aksu, they will understand it because I will make sure they understand it.
I suppose, but the bottom line is, for me, is ultimately why they didn't get the whole premise of this is a serious thing. When you have conditions on a license, you try and abide by them. That's the kind of the golden rule. So why wasn't, can we trust these individuals to actually take this seriously without you having to push them for it? I mean, was it because there was no one there pushing them to do this before? Why didn't they get it? That's my question. Why don't they get the seriousness of what's happened here?
I think from memory.
And I think of this, sorry. Just to hop on Mr. Ali. My name's Ondar. I was in the hearing previously. Ali's got language barrier, and that's the biggest issue. And we've explained to him because I'm his lucky nephew as well from 5 minutes. I'm doing the security side of it. But I've actually sit down with Guy Hicks and explained to Ali, saying, Ali, you're running a restaurant, but running a bar is totally different. And there's a language barrier. That's what always been an issue. There was no one to guide him. So we are actually there. We have actually gone through. He knows his license, but we had to go through his license A to Z with Ali. to explain, Ali, these are your conditions, you have to go with these. He's at this point, because of the language barrier, that's the whole big issue has happened. And now he does understand that, regardless with, you know, me or Guy Hicks, he needs to have someone there to guide him and to make sure all these license conditions are gone through. So the only issue was here was his language barrier. He's a lovely person as it is. He does follow what he needs to follow, you know, but the only thing was he can't read like the way we could read or understand. That's his big issue. And he's having that issue still. So that's why I had to come in. Guy Hicks himself had to come in. So we had to show him, no, Ali, this is what you need to do. So the only issue was there, Gilbert, is his language barrier. And as I said, Guy Hicks said, we do accept it, you know, and he's aware of it.
I think this is an extremely important hearing, obviously. We are rather going over time. I was going to make some points about this that I hope both the police and the licensee can address in their concluding comments. But if we try and bring this discussion to a close, Councillor Bell, do you have anything that you want to discuss and say at greater length?
Can I check one matter of detail? In terms of the people who might take over the license, did you, Mr. Hicks, quote someone whose experience was at 333 Old Street?
Yeah, he was the DPS at 333 Old Street, yeah.
And I've sat on at least 3 reviews of that premises in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I'd have to look into the times that he was the DPS, but I can't confirm whether he was the DPS during that time or not, Chair. Sorry.
It's not an impressive venue in that respect, applying with own conditions. I've been reviewed at least 3 times.
It's been there a long time, Chair.
Yeah,
it's been there a very long time.
Hasn't it? But again, it comes back to this point I made at the first stage is, do we have any confidence in Mr. Abachi and whoever he might transfer to? Mr. Hicks' involvement, I understand, is as a consultant. It's time limited based on a contract, and eventually you will leave the bar. Is that correct?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be there for the whole time anyway, Chair, to be honest. But, you know, I'd obviously want to leave them in a position where they fully understand what they've got to do going forward. I wouldn't leave them until they were in that position, until they were operating correctly within the licensing objectives.
So again, this question, can we trust the people close to him who have been already involved in running of the SPAR and the poor running of the SPAR?
Can I make one point that was raised in terms of financial issues? It's my understanding, and I'm just want to make sure, look at Mr. Aksu there. I believe he's got a financial interest in the premises as well. So it's not just a case of Mr. Abachi being the puppet master and running all the finances. It's for Mr. Aksu as well, who also needs to make the business work, because he's got a financial interest in it.
Shall we try and close the discussion? I mean, is that okay? Is there any new points that fellow councillors desperately think should be made, or is there anything, Amanda, that we should have covered that we haven't covered?
Chair, I would like to hear from Mr. Abachi, really, just a couple of minutes through his interpreter as to what he really feels about this, because I haven't really got it from him yet. I'm getting very weak answers from him. I want him to say what he really feels about this place and put his case forward, if that's okay.
Kendini anlatamadı. Ben
Sen kendini bir
anlatmanı istiyorum. Bu aylarda sen nasıl bir...
Ben sana anlatayım. Sen söyle.
Chair, can I ask the speaker to speak into the microphone so we can hear clearly what is going on there? Because there's a lot of
Okay, 1 second. Oh, speaker.
I'm gonna translate.
Ben istiyorum ki burası güzel insanların mekanı olsun. Yani valiler gelsin her zaman. Daha şimdi valilere gelmeye başlamıştı zaten.
Because my aim is to have more family-oriented people to come to my venue, more like family with the kids and etc. That's my actually aim and goal.
Might make it more restaurant thing.
Of course, she's basically, he's also saying he's mentioned about how he needs to, work with more professional people who like Guy Hicks and etc. And he look.
Daha güzel yardım alacağız yani.
He
Daha
goes, I'm going to be,
eksiklerimizi gidereceğiz de yani.
as the financial, we are getting more settled in Heart of Hackney. The financial, the most of it, I'm going to be making sure people like Guy Hicks is involved, and you know, they take step and they do what they need to order to do. But because my aim is actually to make this place more a family-oriented place rather than more like people to come and drinking alcohol and alcohol consumption. So they're most like. So we are actually serving food there as well, because we try to encourage the customers when they do come in. But of course, we've got a conditional on our license at the current where we can't allow underage people, which then we have to say no to family people coming in, and that's been a big for us disadvantage, because we cannot get that type of crowd inside, and it's been a shame because that's actually on a license, and we cannot get underage people. And
ben istiyorum ki bu yani şeyin yani daha modern, daha güzel insanların mekan olması için yani daha çok çalışacağız yani. Ben sana ekleyeyim. Sen bir şeyler anlat eksik.
Because my step will be, if I do move forward in this premises, would be, you know, we would like to get more nice crowds and trying to afford.
20 senedir restoran çalışıyorum.
I've been running the restaurant for 20 years next to Harbour Hackney. I never had no issues so whatever. And he goes, I'm a localer, you know, I'm actually a local in Hackney. I've been living, you know, since I came to UK. I've been living in UK. I've been living in Hackney. I've been running this business over 20 years now. And, you know, next door, I would like to do it similar business, like more family oriented. That's what my suggestion was to Guy Hicks as well. In the previous meetings we had with Guy Hicks. To be honest, he goes, this is, you know, I'm going to do my best to get professionals and the professionals to run the business, and I'll be more stepping back. And this is for sure.
Yani teşekkür ederiz her şey için de yani biz elimize gelen şeyi yapacağız.
Because I do appreciate all your time, because I'm going to do what I need to do from my side to hire the right people and to get to run the business in, you know, the way it should be.
Can I perhaps draw the discussion to an end and pose a challenge to the applicant, the police, and the people asking, you know, on behalf of the licensee? Seems to me we're being presented with two options here. We stay with basically revoking the license, which is what the police are still asking us to do, because they're suggesting that only by revoking the license is there going to be a change of ownership that will be the only way of guaranteeing lasting change in the quality of the premises. We've asked some questions, and you have been questioned by Guy Hicks about whether things are as bad there as you suggest, whether the evidence is there. So those are things that you can address, Neil, in your summing up. And then if we go to what has come out of Guy Hicks, the suggestion is being made from your side, as I understand it, that you wish to suspend the license, pursue with the police and with licensing changes to the management and the DPS for the premises. Obviously, that would have to be with their agreement. Number one, how many months would it take you to do that? Because it's not going to happen overnight. And is that going to be enough? You know, Neil Hunswick is saying that won't be enough. Only a change in ownership is going to achieve his confidence that the premises will be run properly into the future. So those, to me, are the two issues that we have to consider in making this decision. There's a lot of minor points, but if I can move to the summing up, it would be great if you could address our concerns in those areas and basically make your case for your preferred way of acting. Who do I go to? So,
yeah, Chair, we missed that because you need to speak into the microphone, please.
I'm saying, I'm just trying to remember who comes next. I think it's reverse order, isn't it? So I think it's Guy Hicks comes next, and then we finish with Neil Hunswick. That's what I remember. It's not on my procedure here. So I think it's over to you, Guy, to address those points in your closing remarks.
Chair, we completely throw our hands up. We are completely at your mercy. We've heard everything that's been said. In reassurance, all I can say is that hopefully I had a fairly good reputation whilst working as the sergeant in charge of the licensing unit. Gave me a lot of knowledge, a lot of insight into how, what the police and the council expect, so that any work that I do with Mr. Abachi will be based solely on what exactly the police want, what exactly the council want and expect, so that the venue can move forward safely and operate and continue. Obviously, if when you made your point about revocation, the license would go, there wouldn't be a license there at all. That premises would shut and be boarded up. And Mr. Abachi would lose an awful lot of money, and there wouldn't be somebody else to come in and take over. They would have to then reapply and go through the normal channels for that license again, because this license would no longer exist. In terms of suspension of the license, if you were of a mind to do that, then we would suggest that we'd be able to get that work done within 1 month. But obviously, we're open to suggestions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any clarification from Councillors Smith or Bell? No.
I believe the applications for change of personnel on the license would take longer than 1 month. In reality, as well. So
as soon as the application goes in, that you state on the application when you wish that to start, and it can be the day that the actual application goes in.
But it could be also longer.
No, when the application goes in, you put on the application the date that you wish that change to commence. So if
longer.
Put the 7th of July, obviously it's going to take slightly longer in these circumstances because there's all the other work to go around it. But in terms of just the premises license change, that could occur within a day. It could happen today.
And if it were challenged,
say again, sorry.
Longer. And if it were challenged, it would take a lot longer.
If it were challenged, obviously it would come back to a committee. Yes.
Sorry, but if we were minded to suspend rather than revoke the license, my understanding is when that operation starts again, we want to see variations to the license, and the owner wants to see variations to the license. We want to see a whole load of policies agreed with the licensing and police authorities. I'll warn you now that I'm with Brian Bell. You're not going to do that in a month, in my view. And so if we were going to suspend, I, like him, would be suggesting we are talking 3 or 6 months. Would you be happy to accept the suspension for that length of time?
Chair, I just would like to seek a point of clarity through the legal officer if that's possible. But it's my understanding that if we were to vary that licence, because it's under a review process, we wouldn't have to go through the normal variation type application. It could be done under the review process as a starter for 10. Secondly, I think you can only suspend the licence for 3 months. At the end of the day, if the only way the applicant's going to, Mr. Abachi is going to keep this licence is to suspend it for 3 months to carry out those changes, then yes, of course, we'll accept that.
Amanda, can you give us clarity on that?
Yes, I mean, that is correct that we can suspend the license for up to 3 months. It's at your discretion whether you choose to just suspend it for a month if you're persuaded that that's reasonable in the circumstances. If during that suspension period, I would envisage that the applicant would work with the licensing authority and that any amendments to the license could be agreed at that point. I'm not sure that whether there is a need for a separate variation application because of it being part of the review process, and also it will be part of the suspension in which you'd be expecting them to make changes and to improve the premises in that time.
Thank you, Amanda. Thanks for that clarification. Let's try and keep this moving. Okay, Neil Hunswick, can you respond and say why you think that is not enough?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's no point in going over the facts. As Guy has already said, they accept what's not happened or what's not been going on there. My assertion would be simply that we'd be unable to trust anybody in Mr. Abachi's inner circle to take on or be an independent person for the purposes of being either the DPS or the licensee. Clearly, Mr. Abachi's been here before, albeit 9 years ago, where probably similar promises were made at the time, and yet 9 years later we find ourselves with a similar sort of thing happening. And in that time, he's never made any attempt to either find out what the license says or what he should have been doing all that time, and he's only now doing it when again he's been caught out. And unless you can find somebody independent, that's truly independent, that to take it over, that situation will not change. And I find that obviously the business partner or a shareholder, if he's been touted as being the potential person to take it over, if he's been involved already, then he's already tainted by the same process. So it'd be my assertion that unless somebody you could trust him to find somebody independent, then you're going to have to go with your instincts as to whether you think, well, he can be trusted.
Amanda, is there anything you think we need to clarify legally, or can we end up closing this, ask people to leave, and then make our decision later? Have we missed anything?
Yeah, no, I think you've covered everything.
And are Councillor Smith and Bell happy for us to finish on this item?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Chair, just in case I didn't make it clear earlier, I did obviously watch the video of the proceedings, and it was quite alarming from a number of points of view. There was the main fight that dragged on for a long time. There was, I think, a subsidiary scuffle I saw at the same time, and there were just so many people in the bar at a time when there shouldn't have been people in the bar. It was quite an alarming breach of virtually both the COVID regulations and the license conditions over a prolonged period, and I think it's worth just stating again how alarming that one was.
Okay, Guy Hicks has put his hand up, and we have to be a bit careful about bringing in new evidence at this stage. But go on, Guy, what do you want to say?
I would just ask the panel there to just put themselves in the shoes of the two SIA that had to manage that. It was chaotic, 100%. Put yourselves in their shoes and try and manage a fight of that size. It's very, very difficult for them. If that was your point around how the SIA dealt with that. Thank you, Chair.
We could draw other conclusions from that. We'll do that in private discussion. Okay, I think we've come to the end of this item. And so, as I say, it's not our normal proceedings. We can't retire, come back with a decision and tell you today. We'll do it at the end of this afternoon's proceedings. We'll make a decision before closing down this discussion, but we'll be doing that in private. So if everyone involved with this review who's not involved in subsequent items on this agenda, if you can leave now, and we will try and press on with the agenda. Thank you all for contributing. Thank you for helping us make a decision which we hope is consistent with Hackney's licensing objectives.
Sorry, Chair, do you want us back at a particular time? Or
No, we don't do it that way
right,
these days. Basically, yep. If you want to ring into the office tomorrow, they will give you a skeleton outline of the decision, and we'll try to get it to you certainly within a week. We'll do the decision first. Yep. The minutes sometimes take a bit longer.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So, sorry, trying to work off the agenda online is always difficult. One thing actually that I missed earlier on was the need to approve the minutes of the previous meeting, which was the 8th of July, wasn't it? So, I mean, I've already approved those minutes. Are other members happy with them? Because that records what we did on the 8th of July, yes?
Yep.
Lovely.
I did send a brief email, Chair. I think on the attendance column, they're called PC Mark Perry, Paul Perry.
Of course, you did raise that before the meeting, yes. So, have we got that wrong, Neil? Is it Mark Perry or Paul Perry?
It's Mark Perry was the, yeah, it's Mark.
Thanks. Eagle-eyed Councillor Bell finds something yet again. We can rely on him getting those small details. Thanks very much.
I'll take him a task on the quality of his statement right in another stage.
Yeah, we found a few corrections there, didn't we?
I know.
Okay.
This is bread and butter police stuff he should be doing.
Yeah, but no comment. Let's move on. Okay, so we decided earlier that So Local missed their spot on the agenda. We were therefore going to proceed straight through to the temporary event notice, which is for the car park just offshore the High Street. and I believe that the man involved, William Rowe, has been waiting patiently. Are you there, Mr. Rowe?
I'm right here, Chair.
Right. And do we have to introduce ourselves again, or do you know who we all are from the council?
No, I've established who you are, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, so I guess we're going to get this introduced by Sabangina. We don't get vast numbers of these referred to us, but so you probably quickly better outline the procedure so everybody knows what we're doing here. So can you take it away and introduce this item, please?
Thank you, Chair. Temporary notice was given to the licensing service in respect of the car park of 14 Anning Street for an event to be held from 1800 to 23:30 on 9th of July and from 1200 to 23:30 on the 10th and 11th of July for each day. We have received objections from Environmental Protection and from the police. I have nothing else to add. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so for clarity, can I make sure everybody realizes this was not in the paper agenda? It is, however, on the, let me just get back to the meeting. It is, however, on the online papers, which people can read. And basically, the only people who consider temporary event notices, which, you know, let's face it, were originally set up for village fates and things. The only people who consider that are Environmental Protection and the police, and they can comment if they think the reasons it should not be granted. So who's going to go first, the police or Environmental Protection? No, is someone going to volunteer here? So we have Neil Humwick, I think, from the police.
Yep.
Have I got that right, Neil? Go on, you take it away.
Chair.
And Gertch Patty from the Council's Environmental Protection team.
I was going to read out my objections, but I'm struggling to find them on my computer. But basically, we have had a number of emails from members of the community with concerns to the possible cumulative effect that an additional medium-sized event may have within the Shoreditch SPA area. As a result of that, we have objected to the 10 on the basis that there may be some additional antisocial behaviour that is caused in the area by additionally licensing this area. And as a result of that, we've put objections in and submit it for subcommittees to consider whether it should go ahead.
Thank you very much. Sorry, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, Amanda, but we normally let the applicant of any of these hearings go first and then other people to respond to it. So I'm hoping I'm doing the right thing. And I was going to ask, is it Mr. or Ms. Patty to explain why Environmental Protection has objected to this application?
Thank you, Chair. It's definitely Mr. Gertch Patty from Environmental Protection.
I can't see the picture.
Yeah, sorry, my camera doesn't work. Apologies. It's a fairly simple and basic objection from the Environmental Protection team. As Neil pointed out earlier, we have received a few concerns from nearby residents. Just a very brief statement from Environmental Protection. We have concerns with the addition of regulated entertainment. Noise emanating from the event could amount to a statutory noise nuisance, hence undermining the licensing objective public nuisance. The Environmental Protection Service, as I mentioned, is in receipt of numerous complaints from nearby residents in relation to previous events held and the cumulative impact of granting future temporary event notices within this area. And as Neil mentioned earlier, this is exactly why we've left it to the subcommittee to make a decision today as to whether this temporary event notice should go ahead. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And so who is appearing on behalf of the applicant? Am I correctly understood that's you, Mr. Dow? Are you on your own or do you want somebody else involved?
No, it's just me, if that's okay, Chair.
Can I put it to you? I mean, I'm looking online. I'm sorry, I find it more difficult to follow things online, but I'm looking online at the evidence before us. And it's always a good idea when we get involved with temporary event notices to understand the background and to talk about what mitigation you are going to put in place. Were you aware of this wave of objections from the neighbours to the impact of previous events? And if you were aware, I can't see where you're addressing those concerns in your application, which typically will be done through a risk assessment or something similar.
Sure, thank you, Chair. For the record, we weren't aware. We've been in Newham Yard for the last 7 years, and we run a venue with multiple previous 10 applications without any objections or complaints. And we've also had the previous 10 accepted, which adds a layer of, on our side, sort of confusion as the need to even go through the process. And the reason why we didn't execute on that initial 10 was purely down to the beautiful British weather. And it wouldn't have been possible because it was a downpour all weekend. So we've subsequently applied for the new 10, which is due for this Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And off the back of that submission has raised the objections with our neighbours.
Thank you very much. I'm just checking my procedure. I didn't ask for clarity at the end of those previous submissions. So first of all, let's go to Councillor Smith and Councillor Bell. Do we need any clarity from any of the people who've given evidence to us so far?
No, I think I'm happy. Thank you very much, Chair.
And also, Mr. Rao, are you the only person appearing on behalf of the applicant before this committee today?
I am, yes.
Okay. Can I just head off the discussion stroke questions? I guess I want this from, it can come from either side, Gertz Patty or the police. Surely, in responding to complaints about noise or anything else, it is standard practice to visit the alleged perpetrators of that nuisance and to talk to them. So I find it rather strange that Mr. Rao is telling me he knew nothing about this sea of complaints that you're dealing with. Can someone just tell me what the procedure is and whether it's been followed?
Chair, yeah. In relation to what has been said, a previous temporary event notice for this event was submitted. At the time, I met the applicant and several other members of the organisation at the location and went through exactly what they were proposing to do. That temporary event notice was initially objected to, and those objections were withdrawn once we had met and spoken. That event didn't take place because of whatever, that was supposed to be the May weekend. A subsequent temporary event notice was put through, which, because I'd already discussed everything with him, we did object to, and that was granted. That's the temporary event notice that they are referring to that didn't go ahead because of the weather. Now, at some point after that temporary event notice was submitted, okay, the local community has become aware that this new temporary event was submitted, and they have then, there's been a wave of objections to both police and to environmental protection that they do not wish this event to go ahead. So we have put objections through on that basis so that it can be put towards subcommittee to make a decision as to whether it should do so. So it's partially true. There was no complaints for the first 10s, but didn't go ahead. But the subsequent 10, we have received complaints, and we have again met and discussed that. And it may be helpful if the nature of the event is discussed by the applicant to make you aware of what he's actually proposing.
I can see your hand is up, Mr. Rowe. Can I just go and ask for clarification on that same point from Mr. Patty? See if he's got anything to add, and then you can come back on both together, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I totally agree with what Neil has said. He's given an honest account of what's historically taken place. There has been a few previous temporary event notices that have been submitted. Both the police and environmental protection have objected and then withdrawn the objections. But those the last two temporary event notices that were submitted were actually withdrawn. And just before this last temporary event notice was submitted, there were a flurry of complaints from nearby residents because perhaps they had seen some kind of online advertising of some sort for the previous events. And yes, the residents are complaining about an event that hasn't actually taken place yet, if that makes much sense. They might be referring to historical events that have taken place. You're talking a few years back, but nothing that I can recall quite recently, especially for the actual location of where this car park is. That's all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Amanda, can I ask for your legal advice? Because I know the objections to this have to come to any application for 10, basically come from the police or from environmental protection. But I mean, those of us who sat on licensing committees for some time know something about the history of this site and previous events there. So are we allowed to take that into consideration, or do we have to purely consider the evidence given us by environmental protection and the police?
Well, it's mainly the evidence that's presented to you, but you can take into consideration, I suppose, the issues that have previously occurred there as part of the reasons for why you decide to issue the counter notice, if that's what you decide to do. So yes, you can take into consideration those historic points as background information. But it isn't largely the information that's presented to you today that you will use to make that decision as to whether a counter notice should be issued or not.
Thank you very much. That sets the scene. Sorry, Mr. Rowe, to keep you waiting, but you might as well reply to the whole lot and get our background straight before you start. So take it away, come back and tell us why we should not issue this counter notice.
Thank you, Chair. And if I may just give you a little bit of context that will hopefully clarify and reassure everybody on the call, but also our local residents as well. And if I may just give you a quick background on us as a business, we've been based in Hackney since 1999 as a proactive member of the local community, working with local charities and also organisations. In 2010, we set up Protein Studios, which is our building on Newen Yard, which we moved into from Hewitt Street. And more recently, we've really looked at how the local community's needs are met. So we have a workspace upstairs and different event spaces downstairs, as well as our licensed cafe, Oat. And for the record, Protein is a 50-50 owner of Oat Cafe. As we know, COVID has been brutally affected thousands of businesses in Hackney, ourselves included, and our studio business lost 100% of our revenue overnight last March, and our event venue was closed for 14 months. Similarly, our cafe has suffered substantial losses due to the repeated lockdowns. But luckily, it's not all that bad. In recent months, our studio business has slowly picked up, but we're still 50% down on where we were in 2019. From its successful premises license awarding, of which I'm the license holder, for clarity, means that a good number of local jobs are now secured as we can trade profitably. And for us, as the economy gets back on its feet and things return to normal, we wanted to do something to give back to the local community. And therefore, we decided to host a smaller version of our previous block party to raise money for charity, but also try to make up some of our losses through Protein Studios and for Oat. And just a point on the block party references, we previously held them on Newen Yard in 2014 and 2017. These were much larger productions, over 3,000 people over the course of the day. We closed the streets, Newen Yard and Anning Street, We're very much focused on showcasing local food operators like Lyle's, Voodoo Ray's, and Cream. But ultimately, it was aimed at a family-friendly local community event that raised over £3,000 for Amnesty International, who are our neighbours next door in New Yard. So I guess that brings us on to this current application, and hopefully, again, for point of clarity. And again, Chair, to your points around consultation, since the objections have come in, we have actually consulted with the Environmental Office, the police, and local residents to proactively address any sort of noise issues, just to establish basically a sound check, for want of a better term. And also we've decided to rename and rethink the format of the event to, again, clarify any misunderstanding in terms of the communication. As a result, we've renamed the event to Good Vibes and not Protein Block Party, based on the previous expectation of what is Protein Block Party, which is a big street closing daytime and evening event, to this, which is a much smaller 180 capacity food-led seated pop-up in a secure car park off Anning Street that will involve no street closures. We've also changed the dates, well, original dates due to weather, but recent dates so they do not coincide with the Euros for the football. And equally, for the record, we will not be showing any live sport, including any football. As previously mentioned, we've looked to address any of the concerns for public disorder, our COVID and dispersal policies that we've been working through with Gertch, the levels of security, and also mentioned the number of noise levels. Which I guess brings us on to our final point, is our, I guess, sort of confusion as to why the objections are now coming through following the previous acceptance of the initial 10. And for us as a business, we've already spent over £10,000 to get the event set up based on this initial 10 being awarded. So we're very much hoping that we can continue with all of these considerations in mind to make sure we can actually produce this event without any issues, objections, or concerns. And I think final point for us, it's very much about supporting the local community, both in terms of our tenure here in Hackney, but also in terms of local operators and attendees of the event. Thank you for your time, Chair, and invite any further questions.
It would be unfair for me to abuse the position of Chair more and not let Councillors Bell and Smith come in. I'm just going to press something out there now. If you have had discussions with Mr. Patty and Mr. Hunwick, I would suggest to you that it'd be good to tell us what those are, and then for Mr. Patty and Mr. Hunwick then say why they're still asking us not to allow this 10 to go ahead. But I'm going to leave that to rest because I've spoken enough. I'm going to get Councillors Bell and Councillor Smith to carry on this discussion. So come on, Councillor Smith, I think you've got your hand up.
No, I'm going to let Brian come in first this
time. Come on, Brian.
Just for clarity from Mr. Rowe, the nature of what's key here is probably at night part of the offering. I don't think many people object to the kind of event you're talking about during the day. But what exactly happens until 23:30? Is there music, and when do you stop serving alcohol?
There is music, but it's low-level music, and our license alcohol will be stop served at 11:30.
So you're not allowing any dispersal time after?
There's 30 minutes dispersal time. This was after our initial meeting with Mr. Hunwick to bring that forward by 30 minutes. Certainly on the Saturday, where there is another event which has a midnight licensing close. So there is accommodation for, I guess, a staggering of that dispersal time.
Sorry, I don't understand. Are you serving alcohol till 11:30?
We are serving alcohol till 11:30, yes.
So there's no dispersal time within your 10?
To be clarified, I'm not sure the difference between the licensable hours or the dispersible hours.
licensable hours don't include any special time then.
Not that it's been clarified for us.
See, I don't understand how that works. How can you give someone a drink at 23, 29 and say, get out in 23:30?
Sorry, Neil, maybe you could help clarify this point.
No, I'm putting it to you, Mr. Rowe, you're the applicant. Must know what you're trying to do.
Sorry, I'm not aware of the clarification of the difference between the last drinks and the dispersal time. My understanding is, my current understanding is that last drinks are at 11:30, and the everybody needs to be out by midnight. That is my current understanding.
Chair, can I come in on this?
Certainly, Councillor Smith. Sorry, I'm just looking at the papers again.
Maybe Amanda could help. I mean, basically, I think William, your 10 is basically, you know, from until 23:30. Basically, that's the time you've got to do what you want to do. So, you know, the dispersal time would have to be within that somewhere.
Okay.
To give you enough time to get people out. So you might have to finish serving drinks at 11, for example.
Okay, understood.
Our normal view with licensing applications is we expect half an hour from the end of consumption to the closing of the business, because we just basically think that that's a realistic figure. So that's what we would expect, and we're looking at your opening hours. We're not used to looking at loads of 10s, so we may well take Mr. Hunwick to put us straight on this one. Go on, Mr. Hunwick.
Yeah, go on. It's my bread and butter day in, day out. This you can't. Only a subcommittee can set conditions on a temporary event notice. What was actually agreed was Euro car parks, which is directly next door to the car park at Anning Street, have got, I can't remember, it's either a 12 or 12:30 licence. So they can serve alcohol up to 12 or 12:30. What I was agreed, initially the first 10 was put through to midnight, and what I agreed with the applicant was that it would cease at 11:30, so that's when the last drink served, and then that would allow half an hour dispersal so that everybody's left before Euro car park starts dispersing. So there was a staggered dispersal between the two. Now, it may well be in the circumstances that the committee feels if they are minded to issue the 10, they want to take some more time off of that to make it more of a daytime event. But as it stood at the moment, that we had agreed to the 11:30 finish to then have half an hour drinking up time and dispersal afterwards. So that was by agreement, and that's why the time was brought back.
Thank you. And I'm going to take some legal advice here, because we did discuss this in preparation for the meeting. Amanda?
Yes, yeah.
I understand. How could we say, well, we'll approve it as amended? Are we faced with the decision legally that we either, we either issue a counter notice, we can't issue a variation notice. So if the applicant was minded to say, okay, we'll close a bit early to increase or decrease the impact on the neighbouring residential properties, is there any way they can do that?
They'd have to resubmit a new application. Your decision mainly today is to decide whether or not to issue a counter notice.
And would they have time to make a fresh application and still go ahead with the business?
No, I don't think so. No, because the event is this weekend.
Thank you.
Yeah, it'll be out of time now for a new submission, because it'll be within 5 clear working days.
And there used to be some sort of emergency provision, but that doesn't work either, no?
No, you've got a standard 10, a late 10, and an out of time submission. So there wouldn't be time to resubmit it. If there was going to be an agreement with regards to reducing the hours, then it would be taking the applicant at his word that he would close early.
Thank you. Okay, other councillors?
Yeah, just how many stalls do you think will be there, William? Obviously 3 days, I know you've invested 10,000 in this already. 3 days to go doesn't give you a lot of time to get this together. The COVID restrictions are going to be lifted, according to Mr. Johnson, on the 17th. I pose the question: might it not be a better idea to do this later? Any complaints from previous events? I've just had a look at a YouTube video of some of the previous events you've had, and they look great to me. They look a lot of fun, lots of kids involved. People enjoying themselves. And that's exactly what we need right now, after having been in lockdown for so long. And just on the tables, you say there's going to be 180 capacity seated. This is kind of quite crucial. So just want to understand sort of how kind of many tables you might have, where people are expected to sit. Will there be much spillover out onto the streets? Would you expect that to happen? Kind of normally does. And just about toilet facilities in there. I think that's quite crucial as well from the point of view of ASB and urination on the street and stuff. So it's just simple sort of logistical stuff would be great. Thank you.
Before you respond to that, can I bring in Amanda, who always has very relevant legal points to make, and so we better make sure we don't stray into areas we can't. Go on, Amanda.
No, all I just wanted to ask through the chair is whether or not you would like to clarify with Mr. Hunwick, although he agreed the hours or suggested the hours to 11:30. For example, on the Sunday, does he still, does he have concerns about the impact on the area, or could this result in more complaints then if this event went ahead? So if you could just clarify a bit more about that, because I suppose the main thing for you to be concerned about is how is this going to impact the area? And obviously, in addition to the points Councillor Smith has just raised just now, are really quite important for you in your decision making. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is a good point. But before either Mr. Rowe or Mr. Hunwick come back in, I just want to clarity on a thought. Yeah. So what we're being told is we can either issue this counter notice or not issue this counter notice. What I was going to suggest is there's been discussions, there's concerns now that Mr. Rowe is aware of from some of the neighbours. What we could, and we'd entirely on trust, listen to you, Mr. Rowe, about ways in which you were, to avoid losing loads of money, run a curtailed event, i.e. packed up serving alcohol at 10 o'clock or something like that to make sure it didn't upset the neighbours. So, you're cutting your losses basically. And that would then inform our future consideration of tens, because obviously if you manage to manage it, if you run this in a way that doesn't upset the neighbours, then we shouldn't get a storm of events next time. So I want, in your contributions to discussion, I'm going to take Mr. Rowe first and then Mr. Hunwick afterwards. Can you address all those various points? But would you give some commitments here? And that's partly what Councillor Smith was asking about. Would you give some commitments here that we can't enforce them, but hey, we're going to remember what happened next time you come up for a 10? Go on, Mr. Rowe.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I appreciate the passing of trust, or potential passing of trust. Maybe if I could take those points in reverse. On timings, 100%. We are, open to making this work. And as previously mentioned, and Neil has clarified in terms of the closing hours, we are obviously open to reducing those to, remove any additional concerns or complaints. And as per my earlier statement, we are an active business here and have been for over 10 years, and feel that we've been very sort of supportive and collaborative with local communities. So the last thing I want to do, and I'm sat here right now, is to annoy any of our neighbours. That doesn't help anybody. So in short, yes, I'm completely open to a revised suggestion on timings. I think coming to Mr. Smith's point on some of the specifics, and I can follow up with all the details, or Gert would happily share them, as we have all of those specifics defined in terms of seating plans, dispersal policies, number of food stalls, which is 3, and in terms of security, loiter or spill out onto the streets. All of these have been considered, as well as sort of a clear COVID policy in terms of the setup. which again, for additional context, we run a 4,000 square foot venue downstairs. So even as part of our general insurance of running this venue, we have good experience in ensuring that as a venue, we are compliant, but also on behalf of people who actually host events here. So we have good experience to make sure that all of those points are covered. And as I said, I'll happily share any more sort of specific details, Mr. Smith, Councillor Smith, sorry.
And toilets, William, what about toilets?
Yeah, we have portable toilets, 5 portable toilets on site, which are the self-contained portable loos that would be brought in.
Yeah, and so when you say 3 stalls, do you mean 3 food stalls?
Yeah, sorry, three food.
And how many bars?
3 food stalls and 2 bars.
3 food stalls, 2 bars, and how many seats or tables?
180. It's 30 sets of 6 pub-style fold-down benches.
Okay, so quite a number of benches then. Cool.
Yeah, it's all, well, I mean, within the COVID restrictions as well, it's all seated table service.
Yeah, and just to come back on the point that I made about kind of doing this after the 17th.
Which is a good point.
I mean, obviously, it would kind of make more sense to do it that way. But I mean, you've obviously fixed on this date. Is that why is that?
Why is that? Because we're ready to go, I guess. Right. And we've already had sort of 2 full starts due to the weather, and I'm even looking at the weather this weekend, and there is a potential that it might be pushed again. Yeah. We have discussed internally, due to the lifting of the restrictions from an operational and a production point of view, it's a lot easier on numerous levels, just in terms of table service and capacity. So yes, there is a potential that well, we'll see what happens with the weather.
And then if this went well, and residents were happy about the timings and the kind of the way that things have worked out, would you consider doing this again in the same location?
We would consider doing it again. Yes.
Okay. So it's important you get it right this time. Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and sorry, Councillor, just on that, and it's an important one, and the reason why we didn't push for it previously is exactly that, is to make sure we do this one right, for the intention of doing it not every weekend, but semi-regularly on that same site, firstly, but secondly, in terms of our sort of position as a business within the community, but also adjacent to this site. We want to make sure we're following every step of the process.
Yeah, and I think the discussion on the hours is really important, Chair, that we need to get them right, obviously. And I think there is football on Sunday, I believe, isn't there?
Apparently, hopefully.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Contributions from other councillors. Councillor Bell, do you want to come back?
No, thank you. Fine.
So, I mean, our standard way of dealing with all of these discussions is to take people in reverse order. If we're not issuing a counter notice, I mean, it's good to hear from you, Mr. Rowe, that you've had these ongoing discussions with Mr. Patty and Mr. Hunwick. What I'd like to have, and we start with you and then go around the other 2, what I'd like to have is some clear indication of how we're going to minimise the nuisance to your neighbours that you say you want to avoid anyway. And in particular, what causes me concern is, I was amazed cycling down last Saturday night through Shoreditch and the city. There was an army of police all parked around the city. Clearly, there were already loads of people out on the street. Quite clearly, football does attract lots of people. So I'm not sure that having a big venue when the football is happening is necessarily going to be good for the neighbours around Shoreditch. But can you just give some indication? What I minded, if we didn't, what I'm expecting Mr. Patty to do and Mr. Hunwick to do, say, are you a guy they can work with? Are you a guy they can trust? And have they got time to talk about how we can address all these potential risks before the weekend, so you don't lose a load of money, but you're not going to upset the neighbours. That's what I want to hear. So I'm not getting enough definite from you at the moment. I mean, the idea that actually we're not going to have this event if the football's on because the Shoreditch is already going to be overrun with a load of young people getting drunk. So can I just go round? Is that all right, everybody? Can I go round? Mr. Rowe, Mr. Patty, Mr. Hunwick, and then we bring this to a conclusion. Have we covered everything, Amanda? I think that's the thumbs up.
Yes, that's fine. Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So come on, Mr. Rowe, William Rowe, talk to me about that.
Thank you, Chair. I think, well, to clarify, we will not be showing any football, but equally recognise there is football on this weekend. As mentioned again, like our position here is one of maintaining our relationships with our neighbours and obviously with the broader community. So if it would suit the council that we did actually defer this event this weekend to ensure that all points are totally covered, that's definitely something we would consider. Rain obviously depending, because that might actually force us to defer it anyway. Equally, to provide some certainty on hours, it's something that I would like to confer with my partners on before actually committing to this call. But it is something that we would definitely consider to bring earlier, to make a clearer distinction between the Euro car parks, and equally for clarity that the Euro car park I think is only on Saturday, whereas our intended event is on a Friday as well as the Sunday. But to ensure sort of dispersal needs are equally met. So yeah, I hope that you would accept these sort of suggestions as ways of moving forward. As to us, it's, as previously mentioned, like we get to do this right, because we're hoping that we will be able to do it on a semi-regular basis.
Thank you. So, Mr. Patty, followed by Mr. Hunwick, if we go in reverse order. Is Mr. Rowe and his associates, are they people we can trust and work with? Could you agree either to defer, probably depending on the weather, or ways of limiting any nuisance this weekend that we would take into consideration in considering future tents? And one thing that I don't understand why we don't do more often, there's considerable discussions been had here, and I know I have looked at TENS where there's been a very considerable risk assessment, and it talks about all the possible things that could go wrong and what the venue is doing to address them. And certainly in the long run, I'd like to think this venue, if they've got the area's interests at heart, could come up with some agreed risk assessment of what might cause nuisance to the neighbours and how that would be addressed. But come back to me and tell me, are you still what's it called? Notice. So, Mr. Patty first.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to point out, in separate emails that's been sent through from Mr. Rowe and his representatives, they have actually mentioned that the music levels will be at a background level during this event. And if music is generally played at a background level, it's unlikely to cause a nuisance to nearby residents. But that considered, this car park area where this event is supposed to be held is fairly close to nearby residents' homes. Now, I have historically told Casey, who's in charge of this event, to make ideally some kind of noise assessment and give us a report. That hasn't been done, but what I have been given reassurances of is that the music will be played at a very low level so that it doesn't cause a noise disturbance. Then you've got the other factor, which is people noise. There's 180 plus people potentially being inside this car park area, and with the residents living so nearby, it's almost inevitable that we will receive complaints. Whether that amounts to a statutory noise nuisance is something for the officers to make an assessment of. With the volume of complaints that have come through already, it's almost inevitable that there will be complaints during this event, and that obviously that's one of those sticking points, and that's why we've actually ended up at subcommittee here today. Yeah, I think that's all I can address at this
Sorry,
moment.
Mr. Patty, one thing I should have raised this previously, I do apologise.
Yeah.
I think in your submission, you also were concerned that you could get that number in and comply with COVID restrictions. Are you now satisfied that what you've agreed with Mr. Rowe does meet COVID restriction requirements?
Yes, essentially, yes. I have been given documentation where they've highlighted the risk assessment. They've carried out a risk assessment, and the benches have been bought in, so it's six per bench, and they've got the queue in terms of the COVID regulations, but definitely in terms of the noise and the impact it could have on the nearby residents.
Thank you. So you're still asking us to issue a counter notice, but you are accepting you've got an ongoing good relationship with these operators. I think that's what you're telling us, yes?
That's correct.
Thank you. And Mr. Hundred, please.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, we'd been on site a couple of times, and to be fair, Mr. Rowe's done everything that we'd asked him to do with regards to reduction in hours. If subcommittee deems that a further reduction in hours should be sought, that's fine. The number of security SIA that we asked for to be put on site, that was all agreed. We were satisfied with regards to they were installing toilets, etc. So that from that point of view, there'll be no public urination. It really was the weight of local residents' concerns that were forwarded to us that has led us to bring this 10 before subcommittee to see that, make sure that you are satisfied that it will be operated in such a manner, a good manner. And obviously these things are always subject to review. As I always say to somebody in these sort of circumstances, and I said to Mr. Rowe when I met him on site, if you make a mess of this one, you won't get another one. And that is the beauty of temporary event notices. They are temporary. And whilst we do everything we can to try and plan to prevent anything going wrong, things can go wrong, but it's always a good guidance for any future applications as to how previous ones have gone.
Okay, and let's get this out in the open before we have our private discussions on this, Amanda. If we decide...
sorry, Chair, I wanted to ask a quick question. I'm sorry to backtrack again. Is if, for example, the applicant decided that they were going to reduce the amount of noise that was going to they would have on the days, and if you were satisfied with what they've said, if they would you consider, I suppose, if you're thinking not to issue the counter notice on the basis that they are doing everything they can to reduce the impact on the local area? I don't know how the applicant would feel about that, through the chair. Sorry.
Okay, the point is, this is a public meeting. There will be people watching in, and they will probably feel we've let them down if they've objected to this 10 and we've not responded to it. If we stuck our neck out in that way, we would be seen to be letting down the licensing objective. So that's where we're coming from. I think there's common cause here. We could decide to take that gamble if we believe that Mr. Rowe genuinely wants a good relationship with his neighbours because he wants to carry on having these types of events. There are all sorts of things I could think, like not attracting more people down to London, that part of London, when lots of people are going to be there for the football anyway. So deciding not to be open while the football's on, and going for reduced hours over the whole weekend. I don't know what that does for the economics of the operation, but what if we decided we weren't going to do a counter notice? What I would expect is Mr. Patty and Mr. Rowe and the police to talk about further changes to what we've heard about so far, to absolutely make sure that our credibility as a licensing committee is not completely damned in the eyes of the people who live around the area. I mean, that's where I'm coming from at the moment, but I'm not saying what we have in front of us I'm happy about. And I think it's in all our interest to make sure this happens in a way that reassures neighbours and doesn't mean that we end up with massive opposition next time there's an application. Is that fair enough, Amanda?
Yes, because we have to be mindful about the complaints, which we understand from Mr. Patty could result. So it's the noise impact, which is the main issue.
And that's purely the number of people there, even without noise limiters on the sound. But I think we have enough. Fellow councillors, have we got enough there to go away and make our decision?
Chair, I think we do need to talk about the timings. I think, can I suggest 11 and 10:30, just to get it out there, because we need to talk about the timings. Really, it's very important.
If we didn't issue a counter notice, we would expect you voluntarily to reduce your timings. If we can't make it, we can't do that. But you are in ongoing discussions, and we would like the timings reduced. That's what you're saying, Councillor Smith, yes?
Yeah, pretty much. And I've just said what I think they should be.
Okay, Councillor Bell?
Same as Councillor Smith, really. If the timings were reduced a little bit for service of alcohol, I'd be content with the application.
Chair, would you just double check that with Mr. Patty and Mr. Hunwicks, whether that could be, whether they would consider that?
They're still asking us to issue a counter notice. I think we're stuck at the situation is they're both saying we can work with this guy. They're both saying to us, we think you're going to get objections because the neighbours are now sensitised to it. I think we know what we're dealing with, but basically on this one, we issue a counter notice or we don't. And if we don't issue the counter notice, we're trusting Mr. Hunwick, Mr. Patty, and Mr. Rowe to all work together and minimise the nuisance this causes and the problem they will have with future tents. I mean,
yeah, exactly. So, Chair, can we just hear from Mr. Rowe about what he feels about those hours?
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. As mentioned previously, I'd need to take advice with my other partners on those final hours, but I think...
Can you do that now? Can you ring them?
Potentially. Sorry.
It would help.
Yeah. I guess what I could say that is I think it would be highly likely that we would accept those suggested hours.
Okay,
cool. If I heard you right, it was 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Is that correct?
Well, no, it's 11 close basically.
11
on the Friday and Saturday, and then 10:30 close on the Sunday.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Alcohol. I mean, for the sale of alcohol.
And then half an hour dispersal.
Yeah.
Right. Sure. I think I could highly likely say that would be something we could work with.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Can we close this part of the discussion and get on to the final item of the agenda? Is that okay, everybody? Yes. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you for contributing. I'm sorry this is going on a bit, but anyway, it's good that we consider these things properly. And can I just say, I do actually like it when we are asked to make these decisions. There is a lot of disquiet amongst councillors about the fact that we don't get much of a look into pens. So I'm grateful to Mr. Patty and Mr. Hunwick for bringing that to the committee. Thank you. Rightio, so back to the beginning. Once other people have left, we finally get on to...
Thank you all.
Thank you. We finally get on to So Local 175 Mare Street. We have an application before us to vary the premises licence. Do we have everyone here for that item?
Hi, good afternoon, Chair. This is Maher Kilic. I'll be representing an applicant is Özkan Malda, who is also here. We had a call from council yesterday and today by email. We've been told that we need to start at 3 o'clock. That's why we were not online at 2:30. However, we are where we are. Anyway.
Well, double check another time because we didn't want to put everybody else out, which is why you've ended up having a long wait. So sorry about that.
That's fine. That's fine.
Let us just get stuck in and consider this application. So first of all, can the Principal Licensing Officer outline the report?
Thank you, Chair. Licensing Service are in receipt of an application for variation of premises license under Section 34 of the Licensing Act 2003 for So Local 175 Mare Street to extend the supply of alcohol for off sales, as stated in the agenda. Representation remains from the licensing and the police. I have nothing else to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So can I please invite Mr. Any clarification, sorry, from other councillors? No, no. Okay, so can I ask Mr. Mahir Kilic, the applicant's agent, to make the statement about why you think this change is needed and why it's justified?
Chair, this application was made to extend the hours, and there's a bit confusion. I don't know if the police officer here present, but when this application was made initially about 6-7 months ago, it was intended to make around about until 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning. The license was granted until 11 o'clock, as we understand, at the committee hearing. Unfortunately, due to circumstances we are all in, the license has still not been issued and sent to the premises. I believe this has caused an error to police officer, because in their representation, police officer states that the premises already licensed until 1 a.m. On Friday, Saturdays from 8 to 1 a.m. And they state these hours already exceed the core hours, and they believe these hours are sufficient enough. So
could I stop you there?
Yeah.
Because I know there have been issues. You now have the license, because the license is with the agenda pack for today. So could I perhaps ask Shubhangini to explain to us what the process has been since COVID, since the cyber attack on the council, what the process has been for notifying people of decisions, and also to say whether she thinks the police objection, which says the existing hours are already excessive, is justified or is based on a misunderstanding. Can you please address those two items, Suba?
Thank you, Chair. Since the COVID and people started to work from home and the issues with the cyber attack, we are sending out the decision letters and the license document through emails. And with the police hours as such, I can just confirm that in the representation, the hours which the police have stated is long. So the hours which was approved is for supply of alcohol for on sales, supply of alcohol for off sales, Monday to Sunday, 8 to 2300 hours.
Thank you very much. So in fact, that are we saying, so you're agreeing that in fact those are the correct hours and not the hours referred to by the police, is that correct?
That's right, that's correct, Chair, yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we've addressed that. Okay, so what other points do you want to make about now wanting to extend the hours further?
Yes, Chair. Basically, at the time of the application, the initial application was until 3 a.m. in the morning. Because it was the new applicant coming into the new premises, the hours we asked was not granted at the time. An applicant has been running this premises without any cause of concerns. And in fact, he had 2 visits from the licensing team, and they were very happy with the way it's been managed. And applicant is now seeking to bring his sale of alcohol hours a bit further, in line with the island right opposite the premises. There is 24-hour license premises at 157, and there is another alcohol license premises at Wells Street. So, you know, even if we can't get the same hours of what they have, we will be very happy to get the 1 a.m. Friday, Saturdays for the premises. He's got already CCTV and everything in place at the premises, and he is very experienced in terms of dealing with the nighttime economy issues. He is here present. If you wish to ask any questions, please direct it to him. Unless you have any further questions, Chair, there's not much really we can add since the license being granted.
If it's okay with you, let us hear from the 2 organisations that have objected, and then we can talk to the operator in the discussion phase, if that's okay. Any clarification, Councillors Bell or Smith? No?
Yes, please. Just you mentioned a 24-hour venue across the road or something. What? I'm not a bit confused about that. And I noticed that Mr. Chewett was slightly confused by that as well.
It's can you hear me? Right.
Yeah.
It is at 157A Mare Street. It's licensed for 24 hours.
Well, to sell alcohol for 24 hours a day?
Yes. It's the old premises. And
I didn't realize venues could get that.
well, in the past, they used to get it back in 2000, between 2005 and 2012. Many premises did get that. And also, there's another one at...
I'm not sure this is relevant. I mean, the point is there are some historical 24-hour licenses. Our licensing policy at the moment says we are not into encouraging 24-hour premises. This comes up quite regularly. It does not set a precedent. Our licensing policy does not want licensing creep where we just serve alcohol later and later if there's potential negative impact. So it's not really relevant.
Yes, and this is another application for 24 hours anyway. So.
No, it's for shorter time, exactly. So, sorry, I wanted to step in there because it's a bit of a red herring and it happens quite often. Can we, any other questions for clarification from councillors? No? Okay. So, we'll go on to the objectors. Who wants to go first? David from licensing, do you want to come back to us on this one? The argument that is being made to us is that he's been running the premises for a while, he's an exemplar operator, and therefore we should give him extra hours that go beyond our core policy. Why are you objecting? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I can confirm that we in licensing, we've not had any particular reason to visit the premises or anything like that, or any specific complaints. But our representation is at B2 in today's agenda. So I just set out that the premises and the proposed extension of the hours could have a negative impact on the promotion of licensing objectives, in particular prevention of crime and disorder and prevention of public nuisance. And the concern is that the increased availability of alcohol at a low cost late into the night would undermine those objectives. We, of course, as has been referred to, are aware that there are other licensed premises locally that authorise the sale of alcohol for hours that are longer, but it's just that additional site which we would have the concern about. So that's the basis of the representation today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, I brought you on there, David, because I couldn't see that we've got any police. Oh, no, we've got Hackney licensing. That's the police, is it?
Yeah,
okay, lovely. Sorry, first let's get to, so I've taken in reverse order, but it doesn't really matter. Any clarification sought from David, from Councillor Smith or Councillor Bell? No? Okay, so, sorry, police, come in now. And,
I have a question, sorry.
That's not at this stage. You can put the question in the, when we get to the discussion phase, you're free really to come in with whatever you like. And certainly we always try to clarify things for licensees. But for the time being, let's hear about the objections and then we can deal with them all together. So, Hackney licensing, the police.
Good afternoon, Chair. So, yeah, this premises was granted licence for off sales, I believe it was on the 24th of September 2020. And the hours that were proposed in that application did, as Mr. Killicher said, exceed the core hours for off sales. And police presented evidence in this subcommittee in relation to that undermining the licence objectives, namely the prevention of crime, disorder, public safety, and the prevention of public nuisance. And the licence was granted for 11 p.m. each day as per the licence policy. And my apologies for the mistake. Believe it may be an error for 0100 hours in the initial representation. The same concerns that were raised at that hearing are still prevalent now. We are currently engaging with licensed premises surrounding this venue in relation to drinking on the street and the litter and the noise that accompanies this. Since police have submitted our representations, we've had no correspondence from the applicant or any engagement. They've not contacted us to discuss the concerns we've raised, nor have they produced any documentation in relation to any policies or procedures that they would put in place to address these issues raised outside on the street. And that's what raises our concerns, Chair. And we do feel that the current hours that the premises currently operate are sufficient for the area because of the premises we do have around there. There are already off licenses and places that do supply alcohol to a later hour. And these hours that they do have are those hours that are laid out in the statement of licensing policy. And because these concerns have been failed to address and we haven't had this engagement and the concerns we have, we do ask that this application is refused. And that's it from myself, Chair.
Well, thank you very much. I must say I did like the evidence you submitted. It did reference local issues, which we like, obviously, because we can take that into consideration. And I noticed that you said you look forward to hearing from the applicant. So it's a pity the applicant did not get in touch. I'm just going to put one point, because he wanted to come in, to Mr. Killich, and then I'll throw it open to other councillors. Sorry, any clarification on what Hackney Licensing has said there, Brian or Gilbert? No? Okay, so the point is, I'm looking at this, and what the applicant is seeking after a very short time of being open is a large extension way beyond what is allowed for in our core policy. If I see an application like that, I do expect to see some justification on why it is desirable, why it is wanted. We've received none of that, and our licensing policy makes quite clear that simply a good track record is not enough suddenly to get yourself a whole load of extra operating hours. It has to be a bit more justification than that. So can you just explain to us what the justification is for why you should exceed the core hours that are set out in our borough-wide licensing policy?
Right. First of all, we have sent a few emails to Hackney Police, but we don't usually get any response from licensing team. That's because they probably working off-site or not from the office. But what you have not heard, Chair and members, you've not heard anything in relation to premises regarding the existing issues. There is no evidence, any evidence that links to our premises regarding noise or litter, because we don't contribute to it. The premises is very well managed, very well located, and very professional. You are very close to town hall. When you have a chance, please do go in and have a look around. It's an outstanding supermarket that brings really a good character premises into the area. I mean, most of the businesses there are really very poorly designed, and there are so many things to say, but obviously we're not here to discuss the other premises. But this is a very nice, very well invested premises. The applicant has been there working hard to establish his business and build up his customer relations, so on. And only like 4 or 5 doors away, other premises are allowed to operate and sell alcohol until 3 o'clock in the morning, and he feels this is very unfair. And we're not asking to get the similar hours, same hours. They are licensed until, some of them are 24 hours, some of them are 3 a.m. He's only trying to extend it for 2 hours. I mean, this is not in the cumulative impact zone, and what licensing offices, licensing team and the police said is no more than assumption, or I will say speculation. There is no evidence to suggest anything about the management of the premises. If there are, I believe you can grant this license having in mind that there is a review mechanism. I'm sure licensing police officers and licensing team will be very active if they do not adhere to any licensing conditions or contribute any of the prevention of crime or licensing objectives in general. If they don't manage their premises well, I'm sure they will have some sort of mechanism there to control and put them in line into what they should be doing. I mean, I can't think of any further conditions to ask you to consider, because he has enough conditions on his premises license. We believe he meets the kind of criteria, I will say, to get the license. He should be allowed to have a premises license for the areas he's applying for.
So, sorry, I'm still having a justification for why we should be giving allowance that exceed, sorry about that echo, that exceed what is in our core policy. I would expect some positive justification to be given to me that, you know, I don't know, there's late workers come by, that there's limitations to stop people taking the alcohol onto London fields where we have regular problems.
Shall we hear directly from him? Özkan, would you like to?
Yeah, okay.
Tell us why you want extra hours. We can't hear you, Özkan. Yeah, go on.
Hello, Chair, everybody. I've in my previous work, I've been a prison custody officer. I have dealt with custodies, prisoners. I've been a door supervisor, which I've had to deal with all types of drunkens, and so I'm quite well knowledge when it comes to background and seeing, you know, the people who's, you know, this drunken disorder. I've opened this premises, and all you're more than welcome to come by. There's not one person who's disregarded it and, you know, said it was a bad place. Such a nice place in the heart of London. I don't believe it's been said that it's the best supermarket in London, believe it or not. I'll say no, nowhere near it, but I respect that, you know. People, you know, entitled to their opinions. I welcome you all to come by and see. It's a family-oriented place. I've not asked for no miniatures or high consumption of alcohol due to the fact that I do live in the area. I have been living in the area for 35 years. I do know the area well, and I do know that I'm fully aware of the fact that there's 2 hostels around. So for that purpose, I do not want to exceed my alcohol limits. 5.5% alcohol is more than enough. That just keeps in the professional people, which is what I'm going for. You know, I don't need the.
Can you tell me who you intended to sell alcohol after 11 o'clock? 2 hours we want, like until 1 a.m.
I do have professional people. Sorry if I dragged on a bit. I do have professional people that lives in the back, the flats backing up to the London fields. I've got professors, doctors, barristers, high-class, respectable family people. They do come at 11 o'clock onwards. They do want to get a cigarette. They might want to get a quick beer to chill out at home, you know. And it feels like, for me to say, sorry, guys, I'm closed, it just feels like all the hard work I'm put into it, I'm just saying to them, get out of my shop. And it feels like it's very unprofessional. I mean, they do know, you know, I find it a little bit tough, as to say. And I would like, we're not asking for long hours. I mean, I'd be more than happy to stay until 1. That doesn't mean to say I'm going to stay open until 1, just in case customers do come up after 11 o'clock. I won't turn them back, because as you're aware of, in this pandemic, it's hard enough getting customers, and the clientele that we built up. I mean, professional, high standard of professionalism here. Everyone can. There's not one person that can say a bad thing about this shop, nor the people that work here. I mean, I would love for you guys to reconsider. We all don't want to go no more than 1 o'clock. That doesn't mean to say I'm going to close at 1 o'clock every day or sell alcohol until 1. I will. I mean, on the odd occasion, if I'm busy, then I may, you know. But I have life as well. I like to go home to my family, you know. So that's just like a last scenario type of thing.
Okay, thank you. Can we have other councillors? Do they want to say anything in this discussion?
Yeah, Chair, I'm slightly confused because in the documents it's basically Monday 8 to 2, and then Thursday 8 to 3, Friday 8 to 3, Saturday 8 to 3, and then Sunday 8 to 2. And we've been talking about 1 basically. So I'm slightly confused as to what's going on really.
We emailed previously. We asked the hours to be amended 8 to 1 o'clock.
Can you confirm that, Suba? They say they submitted an amendment to make it till 1 o'clock rather than the times in the agenda.
Sorry, Chair. I've not seen any email as such.
So basically, for clarity, what you're seeking is an extension of 1 o'clock.
Yes, 2 hours only.
So,
Chair, can I pose another question just very briefly, if that's okay?
certainly.
Would you consider 12 Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 1 Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then back to 12 on the Sunday, maybe 11 on the Sunday?
Özkan, what would you say?
Guys, that's perfect. I mean, I'm okay with that. Like I said, I'm not looking to open up every night until 1 o'clock. It's only if customers do to come up. It's just so that I don't turn them back. And that's a high professional custom. It's not going to be no street bugs or it's people that's drunken, you know.
So, we
that's
say Sunday
fine.
to Wednesday. So we say Sunday to Wednesday until midnight.
That's
Thursday,
fine.
Friday, Saturday until
no.
1 o'clock.
Sorry, stop. Monday to Wednesday, 12 o'clock. Thursday, Friday, Saturday to 1, and then Sunday to 11.
It's Sunday 11. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine by me.
I mean, that is a suggestion that's coming out from Councillor Smith. I'm not necessarily minded to agree that, so make it clear that that is not a formal offer, that is just one idea, but in considering options, it is good to know what you would be prepared to accept if we were minded to grant a variation. Anything else, Councillor Smith?
No, that's it, thanks.
Councillor Bell?
I think I agree with your early summary of the position. We have a policy brought in to stop the creep in off-licence hours. And it was brought in for a very good reason and should normally be withheld. We should only overrule it in exceptional circumstances where we've heard from an applicant something different from the usual. And in this case, to my mind, we've heard nothing different from the usual. It's can I trade longer so I can make more money, basically. And that's not necessarily a bad thing if it's within our policies, but in this case, it would go blatantly through our policies. So I would need to hear something else to convince me that that was a possible option. And apologies for my voice, which is getting a little hoarse.
I think you need a drambuie for that, but it's a bit early to start drinking. Shall we just move to concluding statements and then close this item down? Are people happy with that? Yes? So I'll take concluding statements in reverse order. The police. What is now being sought is rather less ambitious than the initial variation application. Does that in any way change your view on whether we should reject this application? Please do advise us.
Thank you, Chair. I think our position does remain the same. This is still an extension of hours if it were to be granted, and it's not so much about management, but the character of the area and the premises that we have highlighted in our representations.
Thank you very much. I'm taking everyone in the reverse order. So, David, have you heard anything that has makes you want to change your recommendation?
Not really, Chair. No, I concur with what PC Atkins has said. Note that the application has been amended and the hours sought have been reduced, but I still have the concerns about the additional hours for the supply of alcohol late at night at a low cost.
Okay. Thank you, David. I think you finished. Let me double check, Amanda. But have we covered all the ground?
Yes, everything's been covered. Yes.
Everything's been covered. Okay. So back then to the applicant. We are still faced. Thank you for the clarification over the hours. I'm not quite sure what happened, but we now know what you're seeking. And things have been difficult on the council with the cyber attack and various systems going down and remote working. So I'm glad you were able to clarify that today. Any final words you want to say before we close this part of the meeting and move to make a decision?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, you've heard from the applicant and you heard the client type that he is targeting. And I've been at the premises. You wouldn't expect any street traders, street drinkers, or any rough, street sleepers, this and that. You won't see that kind of customers in there. He's already got number of conditions that basically limits what he can sell at his premises. The hours you heard from your colleague, Mr. Smith, are acceptable. Sunday 11, Monday to Wednesday until 12, Thursday, Friday, Saturday until 1 o'clock. He'll be very happy with that. And we are happy to consider any conditions you may want to impose to the premises license. We like license to be granted as amended, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I just make a final point in conclusion, which Amanda will tell me off if I'm out of order, but the point is, our licensing policy about the sales of alcohol is not just about street drinking. Yes, we have particular concerns in some areas about street drinkers, but there are a lot of other forms of alcohol consumption that cause nuisance and cause offence to residents. Young kids just being loud on the street late at night. So this is not just about street drinking. So in making your application, you shouldn't make that assumption. But we'll all make our minds up. We've heard what you've got to say. I mean, you can come back on that one if you like, but that it's not just street drinkers. Can I just make that clear?
Fine. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. So I think we've heard everything we need to hear. Thank you for coming and helping us make the right decision today. We have now got some more work to do to decide on these three things we've heard this afternoon. I'm very grateful that you all turned up. As usual, I say we will make a decision this afternoon. You can phone into licensing in the morning for a skeleton of the decision, and then further details we'll try and get out to you within the next week when we write up the minutes and the decision. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.